Today, this panel is really about exploring ideas to launch an audio startup. So hopefully to get some interesting debate, we might be focusing on the pitfalls, the possible problems, and how we can sort of maybe address those issues as we launch ideas to market. And I think really sort of, any potential advice from other parts of the field that might be different disciplines from us. So maybe if we're engineers and designers, the idea of sales and marketing and investment and stuff like that could be a really important catalyst for a successful company. So we want to try and get a bit of a free-flowing discussion. We've got a roaming mic. If anyone's got any ideas or concepts they want to launch in, so please just wave your hand. But obviously we're going to leave the last 15 minutes or so for open questions. But feel free to contribute to the discussion. I think it'd be really nice to get a bit of a directional flow of a conversation. So I'm going to introduce my panel members, if that's great. So my right is Sarah Yule, Director of Sales for ROLI, for Channel Sales. So Sarah's had over 15 years experience in the audio sector, working within aspects of production design, product design, engineering, mixing, published writer, as well as sort of a designer for products. So we're really grateful for Sarah's time, because I know she's really busy. So thank you so much for coming down. On Sarah's right is Charlie. So Charlie, as we know, Charlie Slee is the Managing Director of Big Bear Audio. And Charlie just finished his tenure as the AAS UK Chair, and is currently also the co-chair of the AAS UN He for She campaign. So Charlie's got a lot of interesting concepts about sort of design and products as well. So thank you very much, Mr. Slee. On my left is Selina Parmar, from the Talent and Marketing Manager at the Founders Factory, and a new model in business creation, so closely affiliated with the Founders Forum, combining a strong operational team with world-class network of entrepreneurs, investors and corporate partners to create the next generation of breakout technology companies. So thank you for your time, Selina, much appreciated. And on Selina's left is Jon Eades, is the director and co-founder of the Rattle, which is a brand new home for artists and music tech entrepreneurs, combining studios, rehearsal spaces and co-working with hands-on membership from both Rattle staff and visiting artists, tech entrepreneurs and business leaders. So the first Rattle launched at Tobacco Dock in early 2018, with plans for the first international sites currently underway. Prior to the Rattle, Jon was establishing and played a lead role in Abbey Road's new technology and innovation arm, the Abbey Road Red, taking the department from initial concept through to a world-renowned music tech incubator, counting 11 music tech companies as its alumni. So thanks for joining us, Jon. So the questions, guys, we've got here today are a mix of sort of different aspects of how we can maybe move forward with an idea from realisation through to market. So the first question I've really got is about what processes are essential in bringing an existing idea to launch. So this is maybe a little bit more thoughtful about the concept to start with, maybe, and the actual sort of genesis of what the product may be. So I was going to ask Charlie to maybe lead on the first thought for that.
I've been thinking about this. I was wondering what you meant by idea, whether it was like the product idea or the brand idea, because I think there's a difference there, but they are kind of important. I think, if you've got this idea, from my point of view, if you've got an idea and you think it's a good idea, you need to make sure it's not just you and like your mates and like the mate recording engineer down the road that thinks it's a cool idea, but actually it's something that you can make money from and that you can market. And it just seems a little bit one-sided, because the more you go into this, you think, well, actually, it's all very well coming up with a concept. Like, you could approach that. You could approach another company with this product idea and ask them to do it. But really, I think the startup approach is, it's not just a product, it's a brand identity. And that opens up a whole different kind of worms, really. I think that from my point of view, I felt like I had a really good product idea and quickly realized that the product was actually the brand. And, not just coming up with this one product was ever going to be enough. And not only the product is the brand, but the product is also me. And like fighting the battle of not wanting to be the face of the company, but actually needing to be. So I don't know. It's a weird question, because I think that when you say bringing an existing idea to launch, I think the existing idea has to be the whole startup. It has to be something that has longevity. Otherwise, you might as well just build a couple of units or design some software. And
So it's maybe more about the brand status in the sector as opposed to maybe the initial first product. It's developing that whole brand concept.
I think you've got to be committed to, look, if you want to build an audio startup, you've got to be committed to do this for the rest of your life. And this is not just like, I mean, I'm sure there's people in this room that could come up with a brand idea, a product idea. And there's probably reasons that they don't. I mean, I get approached all the time by people saying, you should do this product. And there's a reason that if they've not done it themselves, because they don't either have the confidence to do it themselves, they're not stupid, or
they are stupid.
Or they are stupid, yeah. That's about it.
So I guess it's like, when I was writing these, maybe the concept of like what processes are essential, it's not necessarily about what the thing does. So maybe what you were saying, Charlie, it's about the actual brand genesis is part of the process as much as the product.
I do think also though product market fit is like essential. Don't just sit around with your friends, like Charlie said, to his point of getting the people around you who are like you to find out whether it's a good idea. You need to know your market, you need to know who the people are, the personas, the demographics, before you even bother, because that is what we've seen in Founders Factory when we're building ideas and concepts, and we've got capital to put behind these as well, so we could launch, but we don't, because that is probably the biggest cause of failure for a startup.
Absolutely. I'd add to that if I can. I think before even thinking about how to take an idea to launch is it actually a good idea? What's the point of it? Has it got a point? My mum used to give me some of the best put-downs ever when I was a kid, and one of my favourites is, Sarah darling, stop being so irrelevant. And I think it's a good thing to think, is this product relevant? And if so, who is it relevant to? Is this brand relevant? And if so, who is it relevant to? And how do you want to get it out there? It's not a concept I've come up with, it's marketing strategy, that there's three main focuses that you can have, and that's either to have a focus, like I'm really going to focus towards a particular market sector or a particular use case. There's differentiation, which is where I'm going to do something, but I'm going to do it different. It's going to be much better quality, or it's going to be much faster, or it's going to have something different about it, or it's cost leadership. It's like, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it cheaper than anyone else has ever done it before, and therefore I'm going to open up the market for more people. But I think, especially for audio products, if it's not just launching a brand new company, if you're thinking about a product, think about the use case to verify, is it a good idea? If it's something that you're going to have in your studio or something you're going to use in a show, what value does it add? And the three things that I always think about with that for a particularly music or audio product is, does it make what I'm doing easier? So say I'm using a mixing console for a live set. Am I designing something that's going to make it easier for me to run that show? Does it make it better? Like, is there something that I'm adding which is value, where I'm going to make this better than anything else out there? And does it make it faster? Is it going to save me time and make my job easier? If I'm a producer and I can do my job faster, I can make more tracks, I can make more money. And I think if you can satisfy those three things, then you've got a concept on your hands that's going to make a lot of money.
So maybe it's about knowing your customer or knowing your audience, as they would say, and understanding where you make it a USP for your specific idea that fits into some brand alignment that you might.
Yeah, you need to know that it's going to be sold as well. And, distributors and dealers will blow smoke up your ass about that for sure. But you do need to speak to them and find out whether they're going to.
How would you validate that? And it's great to sit in the pub, and we've done this. We've sat in the pub and talked about ideas, and but how do you go maybe and empirically validate? Well, not empirically, but how do you really validate that this could be a better idea? If you're maybe, like most engineers might be in the studio, they might not necessarily understand some of the wider concepts of the marketing or the sales and brand awareness. How does somebody maybe get the assurance that they feel that it might be worth running with an idea? Do you know what I mean? It's a difficult question.
My answer to that would, I think it does start with yourself. If you're really honest with yourself, sometimes when something's a bad idea. Sometimes you convince yourself it's a really great idea, but a part of you deep down knows that it's a rubbish idea, and it always has been. But think, would you buy this product? Does this product or does this brand solve something for you? When I was at a former company, 2 companies ago now, I worked for a company called Teal Audio. And while I was there, I was responsible for the conceptual design of a product called the Fat Track. And the Fat Track really was selfishly just what I wanted to have in my studio. I didn't have room for a mixing console. I wanted to do a little bit of tracking, but I was mainly going to be doing mixing, so the idea was to have this all-in-one unit that I could shove in a rack if I wanted to, with all the connections on the top. It was the first analog device to have a Firewire interface that you could plug in on a ribbon cable or an ADAT interface, and it just solved my problem that I had, but I was convinced there was enough people that had the workflow that I did, with the space that I did, that there was potential for it in the market. So I think it's, would you spend your money on your idea? And if you're not willing to spend your money on your idea, and your friends like it, but they just want you to give it to them for free once you've made it, it's not something that's business viable. But I think it's again understanding where do you want to go with it. Like I could design the perfect, we were sitting amongst, I imagine, a lot of audio engineers, so I could design the best mixing console that's ever been made, and it would be the highest end audio with every feature you ever want, with voice recognition and everything, that you could ever imagine. But it would be so expensive that I might sell 5 of these. So can I make 5 of these and sell them at a profit that I can retire after I've sold 5? Or do I actually need to sell 500 before I can retire and go and get my house in Spain and my yacht and all of this type of stuff, or a reasonable sized property in the outskirts of London and a shed. But it's trying to understand what's your lofty aims and ambitions. If it's just a passion project that you want to do to make enough money to live and to do it, cool. If you want to turn it into a business and you want to do it internationally and you want to be a brand, as Charlie was saying, it's a slightly different thing that you need to work
So maybe it's about zooming out from the initial idea and genesis and looking at maybe the longer term goals, or building some aims for what you want your brand to be rather than what the first product is. That seems to be a sort of consensus, doesn't it? Jon, what do you think about, if you're seeing some young guys that are coming to you and thinking about some support and advice from the Rattle, what sort of thoughts do you think would be, their anxieties about it? How would you sort of approach some of these issues that designers might have?
I don't quite understand the question.
Okay, so, it's just really about, this thing about, maybe as an engineer, you might be focusing on the idea of the first product. Maybe you haven't really thought so much about the brand development and the brand awareness, maybe the bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, like Sarah said, it depends on your aspirations. If you want to build a couple of units, sell enough products to sustain a lifestyle, and that ticks over, then cool. But I think a lot of people get confused between thinking that they're building a scalable, investable business when they're really actually building a product. And so, yeah, there's no right or wrong, but as long as there's clarity and thought, and you kind of realise where you sit and what you're actually trying to achieve, then that makes things a lot easier for everyone else. But a lot of people get lost in that pit of going to investors, trying to raise money on a proposal that just isn't investable, and that's quite demoralising when they should really take stock, understand what they're actually trying to achieve, and take a different approach.
So maybe it's more of a focused business plan than a bill of materials sort of concept.
Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. Planning is key, like absolutely key. And giving yourself enough time to really think about what is your strategy and what do you want to do. And I know that can sound a bit boring, but there's actually a lot of fun and creativity in that whole process of thinking, how and why do I want to do things? I remember getting really excited one night after I'd probably been in the pub far too long and having this amazing brainwave of something I wanted to do and going to register the domain name. And without saying what the domain name was, I actually saw a company with this name a few years later, and I thought, well, my pub idea didn't make it outside of the pub, but I do own the domain, so I might try and sell it to them. So I rocked on up and said, I thought, well, I can't say I had a company that I never launched that I registered this domain for. So I said, I have a studio that has this name, but, I'd be willing to sell my .com. And, feverishly went back to my hotel room to see if I could still find all the documents to sell it. And I realised that when I'd registered it at 3 a.m. after being in the pub all night, I'd spelt it wrong. So I didn't get my big exit strategy. But, take your time to plan things out. And, when you do come up with something that sounds exciting to yourself, or sounds really cool, you want to do it immediately before someone else does. You want to do it right now, and you want to have all the money, and you want to get it out there, and it's going to be great. But giving yourself that little bit of time of doing it right, and it is a learning journey. You won't do everything right, but I think write down the idea. Really ideate around what is this? Is it a product? Is it a brand? Is it a concept? How does it materialize? And start to understand. You can start to petition out what the core benefits are around the product, what the core needs are for the type of customer that you want to segment and you want to target towards. And you can also start to think about, well, what are the risks? What are going to be the challenges? And it's going to take a huge amount of commitment. It's going to take a huge amount of work. And
Money helps as well.
Money does help.
Well, I guess
money's
not
the
being,
big elephant in the room, isn't it, I guess?
and not being scared of failure, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah.
It's learn from your mistakes, isn't it? You know? I mean, what do you think is the sort of biggest challenge that you might get from guys that approach you looking for support?
We always have that they've not gone through this process of doing the planning, so they have this idea, but they haven't really thought about, anything post the idea. So anything about, the type of people, the problem that they're actually trying to fix. Is there anything out there? I think the main things that make people fail is either the team setup. We may have like a headstrong sort of CTO, really technical, but just doesn't understand the people focus, or you have a strong CEO who's super commercial but doesn't really understand, how to relate. So team for definite. Running out of money because they've not made this plan. And product market fit are the main ones that we see.
Okay. So I guess it's sort of trying to encapsulate these different skills from other disciplines outside the recording environment to be able to get the sort of genesis of the idea together and get the business plan sorted and maybe think about the team a bit more,
And I think calling on some favours, you mentioned about, talking with your mates down the pub, and, if there's people in your networks that really believe in what you're doing, it's worth considering, are they people I want to partner with in some way? Is there something that they can help me with? I would absolutely recommend, if you know anyone that works in accounting or finance, to go and speak to them. Because I always thought, I used to get so annoyed with accountants and finance people, because I'm like, it's just maths, right? It's just maths. And it wasn't until I did a mini course in accounting and finance, that I was like, oh, there's a real art to this. And I understand why it's so complicated to just work out some of these numbers. It's not just a mathematical equation, it's a whole process, and there's a whole different terminology and vocabulary that these people use to communicate with.
You're saying there's art and accountancy?
There is art and accountancy, which we know, but I didn't realise to what exact extent that did until I decided to learn and held my hand up and said, I think I know about this, but actually I don't know anything about this. I know the core basics about this, and I'm not afraid to go back and learn about it and find out, so I can talk to these people without sounding completely stupid, and I can understand what I need and what I need to succeed. So I think making sure that your networks are good is so important, and building those networks with people that you trust, not just people that you think, oh, they've got some money. I've fallen in that trap before. I back when I was a student, I studied sound technology at LIPA. I don't know if you know the place, but I decided I wanted to start a club night in Liverpool, and I didn't have any money, and I met another student that was pretty rich, pretty loaded, so I decided to make them a business partner. The first night, our launch night, they got arrested for fraud, and I had to go down to the police station and try and bail them out and get my cash float of 600 quid off of them while they were still in jail. And I should have seen the warning signs then, right? Should have seen the flag, but I was just so intent on getting this night going, and we did end up being, we grew to be one of the biggest monthly Saturday nights in the city, but that guy did turn out to be a bit of a shark, and he did screw me over, and I did lose a lot of money from deciding to work with him. And I also had months where, I know a lot of students do, but I lived on super noodles not out of choice, but because I couldn't afford anything else. £1 for 5 packets of super noodles was my weekly shop for a good amount of time when the night had gone wrong and I lost money, and that's my money. So I think coming back to the money thing, understanding where you want to get that money from, whether you do want to invest your own money and take the risk and understand that, not everything goes well all the time, or whether you want to get some investment and who you get it from. Do you take seed funding from your network, from people that you trust, hopefully? Or do you start to look at banks or funds? And I think maybe you could really help with that, because a lot of people that I meet say, oh, I don't really want to take a business loan, and I don't really want to have this hanging over my head, and what if it doesn't work out? Will I be declared bankrupt? And I think actually there's so many different funds and help and advice and things out there for people that have great ideas. So don't think money's a barrier, but money definitely helps. That's what I would say on that.
Okay, so we've got an idea, we've got a concept of brand awareness, we've got a business plan, we've got aspects of financial management. So these are all important aspects. I mean, what else do you think could be important to consider at this early stage? I mean, Charlie, you mentioned distribution. So is there any sort of other aspects we might think that might be an important flag for somebody to even just consider on a general
I don't think we've really reiterated enough that you need to know that people are going to buy this. Like, that's just like the most important thing. Unless you've got some kind of blue sky project angel fund that you can research whatever you want and make whatever you want, then like you actually need to know that people are going to buy this on the ground, and that's incredibly hard to gauge. But and it's a funny one, because when I was approaching, my model has always been, I'm not going to sell direct, I'm going to go straight in with this kind of ancient business model, which is the audio industry, which has distributors and dealers, but I'm going to play that game, and they're going to introduce me to all these clients and all these customers. And I said before, they blow smoke up your ass. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. But I think we need to reiterate that if you're designing something, if you want to make something that's going to pay your rent, you need to know that people are going to buy that. So I don't know, maybe Sarah, you could comment on how ROLI did that.
I mean, where do I start? But I mean, first off, I would say understand how you want to make revenue. So we're talking a lot about buying a product, but actually a lot of startups now are software-based, they're subscription-based models. There's so many different business models that people use now. So it's not just a case of transacting over the sale of a physical unit from place A to place B. So firstly, for the business that you're doing, what is your revenue model? How are you going to make money? And, I would say from an investment point of view, a little stat I found the other day, when someone's valuing a company, when they look at your hardware and what you're doing with hardware, you can get around a 2x valuation. If you have subscription services, for every $1 that you have on subscription, it's about 10x valuation. So people like the fact that they've got ongoing revenue coming in. You're going to have a minimum amount of turnover that's coming into your bottom line every single month, rather than a one-off purchase, which has always got an element of unpredictability and is more susceptible to macro and micro shocks in the economy or from competition. So if you can look at your business model and find a revenue model where you're not just relying on, relying on the transaction of a single unit, but you're looking at, maybe it's a software company and you're not going to sell a single software license, you're just going to sell a subscription to the software services. Even if it's hardware, why don't people do subscription hardware? I wouldn't think, if I found out that, say, Native Instruments or someone had decided that they're no longer going to sell hardware, they're just going to sell a subscription to their software and you get the hardware for free, I would not be surprised. Why not? We do it with other things in our life. So I think it's trying to understand what your revenue model is first before you even get to the distribution stage, because what you decide is going to be your revenue model will then completely determine how you want to do the distribution, and what back end you need to be able to support it, and how you're going to build that and maintain it. But I would say that whatever you're doing with your business, this is one stage in the middle. Make sure that your product or your idea is legal. Make sure that it's actually possible. And if it is a hardware product, like if you want to build something, you need to make sure that you can get it certified for where you want to sell it. You need to make sure it meets all the regulations. There's a whole raft of boring stuff.
You also need to make sure you know how to make it.
Yeah.
If you can make
and
it.
who's going to make it? Are you going to make it in your garage? Or your nice shed in the suburbs of London? Or, are you going to get a manufacturing house to build it for you? Are you going to do it in the UK? Are you going to do it in Europe? Are you going to do it in Asia? Are you going to do it in South America? Is it a design you're taking to OEM? Or is it something where you want people to build the parts up? I mean, there's so much to it, but I think it starts with understanding what you want your revenue model to ideally be, and then working out what your route to market is, and understanding if you can fulfill all of that before you then try and take the product to get built. I mean, I've seen a trap of some people is taking an idea and running to a manufacturer on Alibaba, getting a container load of products that nobody wants built, which is not going to lead you anywhere. But yeah, I would say working out the route to market and how you want to make the revenue, and then deciding on the distribution strategy around it. But yeah, the distribution model in music industry is
Different.
very old-fashioned, but you know, it is. When I was at ROLI, you know, I guess that was one of the things that we did do, because there's not many brands in music or audio that are really new, and there's not really many products which are actually new. They might be an iteration or an evolution of a concept, an idea, or maybe just a different color or a different button. And when I started at ROLI, they had the Seaboard Grand that they just sold direct online, and they didn't have any retailers or distributors in the world. There was one Seaboard Grand on display at MoMA store, and there was one Seaboard Grand on display at a place called Pierre's Fine Pianos in Los Angeles. And so it was trying to work out the route to market, and the main thing that I wanted was to build awareness around the brand. And I wanted to be able to position this as a brand that was mainstream, that wasn't niche, that was up there amongst all the rest of the brands, and start to build credibility. And doing it on our own, just direct with a website for the ambitions of the company, you'd have to spend so much in digital advertising, your whole activation strategy, SEO, and do so much around the storytelling. But because of the concept, I don't know if any of you know what ROLI is or don't know what ROLI is, but basically ROLI reimagined the piano keyboard and replaced the keys with this soft silicon wave of notes. And so instead of just having the strike action to turn the notes on or off, you can have 5 dimensions of touch. I won't do the full pitch now, don't worry. But it was a product that people want to touch. So the whole strategy was about aligning with the premium distributors, the premium retailers, top city locations, like where is going to have the most footfall, like who are the leading distributors and retailers in every territory. And I made this giant monolithic point of sale. I mean, it's this big aluminium beast that's illuminated with a video screen and a product on display. And it was literally like, I want this thing to land in the store, and you have to be blind if you miss this. It's like, ROLI! You know, so, and that's exactly what we did. And that was the big marketing spend. But it worked. People noticed us, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm getting calls from everyone going, oh, I've seen that ROLI thing here, and I've seen it there, and I've seen it here, and we're right there in front of, you know, Yamaha and Roland and Nord and M-Audio and Akai and Ovation and Native, and people are starting to talk about us, starting to hear us, and we know that we're in locations where people aren't looking for our product yet, but they might have come in for something else, and they've seen this, they can touch it, they think, oh, that's cool, and then you start to have that conversation. But it's it really does depend on the product, because if we were making, say, you know, I was speaking...
I was going to say, if it's a software thing...
Yeah, if it's a software thing, it's a different strategy. I mean, also, I was speaking to the guys at Isotope at Music Messe last week. They've just been launching that Spire product. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but, you know, they have a different type of challenge, because, you know, trying to demo an audio interface, no matter how accessible or easy or cool it is, it's an audio interface. Like, no one wants to go somewhere to touch an audio interface. I mean, you might do, but I would question your interest. But, you know, it's really difficult to make some products exciting. So really understand that before you're making your go-to-market strategy. Why does someone want to even see it or touch it? And if they don't, then a digital strategy could work. I feel like I've
Can I put that down to you? Because like, if we can just leave clones completely out of the debate, because there's no time for that. But when you're looking for new brands, does it actually have to be completely original, or does it just have to be something that you conceive that will make you money? Or?
It kind of depends. So I was going to throw in a couple of other things that people should pay attention to, which is competition, which is sort of related to that, and opportunity, which is kind of in the same thing. And it's crazy the number of pitches that I've heard of people that actually believe that they're the first person with this idea. Like I've heard people pitch web platforms for artists and venues to find artists. I swear to God, about 100 times, and every time everyone thinks they're the first one there. So a real lack of kind of market research is an irritation, and is gonna lead to failure. But does something need to be entirely unique? I mean, like Honest Burgers, like that launched in Brixton like 5 years ago. That's massive. Like they weren't the first people to make a burger. So no, they don't have to be. It doesn't have to be a completely original idea. It can be executed in a certain way. But there's an amazing book by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1, which like it's kind of a staple
Bible.
in this world. A Bible. Yeah.
The startup Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. He sort of deals with the notion of monopoly without really calling it that, I don't think. But most people are quite anti-monopoly. But his point is that if you're an investor, that's what you want. You want to find someone who monopolizes a new opportunity. And you don't want to launch a restaurant, you want to become Google, sort of thing. And then, so the last thing I was going to throw into that sort of line of thought is that opportunity normally occurs or tends to occur when there's some kind of shift, some kind of change, a socio-economic event, a new technology that's developed. But that creates a new set of conditions that didn't exist before. And that's how you can answer the why now question. And that's where I think the best opportunities come from. So something like the internet comes into being and creates all this massive opportunity. Or bringing it back to audio, I was talking to Brecht about the development of feature extraction and then the addition of machine learning and deep learning and whatnot. So it's those kind of like seismic shifts and those new technological sort of forces that I pay attention to, because I think that's where opportunity comes from.
So I guess it's, if that's the sort of landscape of actually developing new tools, isn't it, really? So it's coming from a technological development in the landscape. It's interesting. So what do you think maybe is maybe the most common pitfall that's likely to hit a young startup? I mean, we've got lots of different ideas flying around at the moment. So,
running out of money.
Again,
It's all it is. Like running a business is just not running out of money. That's all you got to do. And not having any kind of objective kind of awareness of what that actually means and any kind of plan to ensure that doesn't happen. So yeah, make sure you don't run out of money.
Being able to pivot as well to the market. Not being stubborn.
Dynamic and flexible and on
Yeah.
your feet to be able to move, okay. And maybe a small startup gives them a bit more flexibility because of the size of their operation. And
Usually depending on the founders.
Yeah. I mean, I would echo not running out of money, but also knowing how to manage your money, like how to decide what is the right amount of money to spend on an activity, and knowing what your cash runway is, like how long is this money going to last before I actually need to make some back, and what are you trying to do depending on your type of investment? Are you trying to reach a break-even point within a certain amount of time, or are you just trying to satisfy a particular run rate level of business to continue your investment? Like understanding that and how to manage that, really important. I would also say another pitfall is a lack of understanding around the commercial opportunity. So I've seen with some companies, especially when they're trying to do hardware, they're like, well, I can make this product and it's going to cost me X amount, and so I can sell it for Y amount. And then they try and go into a business model where they have to give retailers margin or distributors margin. Oh no, I was thinking you might understand the
Oh no,
the
I understand it
challenge.
very well. Yeah.
It's for so many products, and it's not just in music and audio, but also consumer electronics and other industries as well. There is people aren't doing it for free, unfortunately. They want to make some money as well. So have you made enough margin in there to be able to give these people margin to sell your product and make some money? And sometimes not. So understand what is your minimum margin that you want to be able to make on a product. I don't want to make you all question some of your purchases, but there's different brands in different industries, and some of them use, the smallest I've seen is a 2x on cost, which is very, very tight. I'd not recommend anything under a 2.5, but some people make like a 5x on their cost price. sometimes even more, especially on cables. Don't be fooled. Um, but you know, it's important to be able to have the structure in there so that you can actually service to the market. You can actually do things, because sometimes you'll have an amazing opportunity. Someone wants to roll your product out or take it on or do this or do that, and you haven't got enough margin in the product, and the price that you'd have to then sell it at takes away the commercial opportunity. So I would say that's a big pitfall of understanding the commercial mechanics, understanding the margin you need to make, and just how your money needs to be managed, like your cash runway, your profitability.
Do you think that's a really regular thing in people? I mean, how would you correct that if you make that mistake on a first launch? You're just going to have to backpedal and try and
Do it
It
properly.
comes
on
back
the
to the
second.
planning stage,
second,
doesn't it? The market research, the planning stage. Like, if you've done the planning and you've done your market research and you've spoken to people and done some reach out, then you can avoid some of these pitfalls. But if you're running too fast and you've not bothered to do it, you think you know better, then that's how you're going to easily start to run into some of these difficulties.
Okay. So yeah, you could cause your own financial
On
problems.
a slightly more personal point, I think that managing disappointment is actually probably one of the most important things, and that's disappointment from you making mistakes and from other people letting you down and other people making mistakes. And you know, sometimes there's just nothing you can do about that. I remember it would have been 3 years ago, I came to Music Messa and bumped into Sarah, and this was going to be like my kind of first introductory launch of my first product. And the previous 3 months, and actually the previous 48 hours, I don't think I'd slept, because all these things just started going wrong. And I remember seeing you on the floor and just like falling apart and just like not being, like just being incredibly disappointed because I wasn't ready. And learning from that was a huge thing, learning that actually, you know, yes, maybe it was a mistake to go, maybe I shouldn't have gone, but also how to, you know, this is going to happen no matter what. In the hardware, unfortunately, it's going to happen a lot more because you've got suppliers that there's a lot more variables. You can be a lot more control of software, but you're going to be disappointed. And, you know, no one's going to care as much as your business as you do. That's just, you know, it's your baby. And if people, you know, people say, oh, that's a pretty baby in the street and walk past, they don't really care about it. Like, this is your life and this is your child, and you know, you've got to look after it. And you've got to be ready when it throws up everywhere, basically.
I wish people were as nice as they were about kids. I mean, even if you think someone's kid's a little brat, you don't walk up and say, like, what's the point of your kid?
Doesn't work.
They don't get on a forum slating your kid for hours, you know, but everyone is a super expert on a forum, right? But yeah, I think getting ready for having a little bit of a hard skin around the reaction. Not everyone's going to be passionate about what you're doing as you are, and sometimes people do really piss you off.
Oh yeah,
I don't know
absolutely.
whether I
Yeah.
can say that. And learning how to deal with it and to take the rejection. And you know, I think by the time I've got to ROLI, the way I see it of what we're trying to do is, if someone doesn't get it, or they don't want to get on board, or they don't believe in it, we don't need to work with them. Like, we want to work with people that are really excited and passionate and share the vision, because that's how we can really create success together. You know, just like anything, if you're all in it together and really working as a team, then you can achieve much more. If you're always trying to fight against the grain with something, then maybe you're going the wrong way with it. You know, I think
Your team's wrong.
yeah, exactly. I think it's learning how to deal with it, and understanding there will be those moments that
Plenty
try
of them. Yeah.
But hopefully you bump into friends that can.
Oh yeah, and the good thing about it is when you like have this story and you're on the trade show floor and you tell everyone how badly it's gone, no one gives you sympathy, because they all just say like, oh yeah, we know, we've been there before, you know.
I mean,
It happens.
has any company ever announced a product and then launched it when they said they were going to launch it? It's not just a toy with you. It's just that there's a list from the floor to the ceiling of potential things that could go wrong, and you try and do a risk analysis around it, and then it's usually the most random thing, the random entry on the list, that is actually what goes wrong and sets everything off spinning. And once one thing goes wrong, it ends up usually being a series of things that then follow on from it that takes a lot longer to to remedy. So yeah, timelines related back to cash. Like, I mean, how many projects have you worked on that went over timelines?
So we've launched 12, maybe 13 startups. One of them has failed within the first year. Every single one of them has gone over timelines. But 2 have been under budget, surprising. But like out of 12, 13, I mean, that's rare. What about you? Because you've seen things come through.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems to be a trend, things to turn out late. I mean, Kickstarter's rife with that kind of thing, right? So you need to be incredibly careful on Kickstarter, that's for sure. Yeah.
So I guess it's like firefighting is one of the key attributes you've got to think about if you're going to dive into this a bit more. Head first, really. So
Yeah, I think there's a few key attributes of good entrepreneurs, of people that do this well, and I think pivoting and being quick to react and quick to receive advice well and learn quickly, I think is key. And then just being stubborn and motivated, like genuinely, it seems to be amongst all successful people. If you're a very good athlete or you've mastered a certain craft, you've got there because you've just literally done it more and for longer, and you're more passionate about it than anyone else. Not categorically, but that tends to be a generalization that works. There's a great podcast, I always tell this story, but a podcast called How I Built This, which to definitely listen to it. It's another kind of staple, and it's founder stories, and so they've had various different people on there, but there's a James Dyson one, and it's not his insight, but he said he learned a lot from marathon running, like in terms of his approach to business, because he's like, when you're at the 23rd mile, everyone's feeling the same way as you, and that's when you have to keep on going. So just genuine perseverance is probably one of the most key traits, I think.
I think someone in our company always says, being an entrepreneur, it's a lifestyle, not a job. So having that as your mindset is similar to a hobby. It's a lifestyle change. It's not going to be a job. It's everything.
do you guys ever see sort of serial entrepreneurs popping up in several different circumstances? Do you get pitched by the same people in different years doing different ideas, or
Yeah.
is that part of the audio world, is it?
And even people that have successfully built and sold a company will often go back in again, because it's quite addictive.
It's addictive, yeah.
I think everyone says this, but the best entrepreneurs genuinely aren't motivated by money. It's something else. It's a game, and it's a big puzzle, and that can be quite addictive. And so you can't really shake that off. Just you've got a few million quid and you sit in your pants for a couple of days, and then you're like, damn, this is boring, and then you have to get stuck in again. So definitely seen that. I mean, one of the co-founders of the Rattle, this is his 4th business now, and the other ones weren't failures. Now, they weren't huge successes. He didn't sit in his pants for very long, but he that's what he loves to do, and he'll be doing it until he gets put down. Or something happens.
So it's the challenge is part of the
Absolutely,
journey, isn't it? I guess, yeah, really. Okay. So I know we've been talking a bit about money, haven't we, and raising some capital. So I know there's lots of different revenue streams that are possible, but let's say maybe a small indie developers manage to get stuff going. What point do they reach out to maybe consider more investment? Is there a specific thing that you think would be good advice for a young company? Give it a couple of years maybe before reaching out to more CI, or I don't know.
I mean, there's a fairly well understood series of stepping stones that people will talk about. I mean, friends and family round, seed, angel round, Series A, B, whatever. And so we're dealing with, generally speaking, all businesses need some kind of investment. Some kind. I mean, there will inevitably be some period where there are no revenues, and something needs to be funded. Someone's personal expenses or the development of something. And so there will need to be personal investment or friends and family in some sense. You're always, if you're taking that approach and you need to raise money, you kind of need to always be aware of it. And then I think one of the things that a lot of people who are trying to build a venture-backed business don't pay enough attention to is that if the future of the business relies on future investment, because it's impossible to reach viability by that point. Everything your business is doing should be optimized to raising that next amount of money, because that's life or death. And a lot of people don't focus on the right things. And if you really narrow down your strategy, it's not often the things you would initially think you should be focusing on. You should be focusing on the things that the investors are going to look at and are going to validate the fact you're going to reach the next stage. So you have to be very strategic about how you raise money at each one of those points. And that's definitely a source of significant source of failure. Just not going.
So I guess if you're coming from an audio engineering perspective, you might not necessarily think about what would be valid for the investor's point of view.
Yeah.
It's maybe a difficult thing to comprehend if you're.
It is, and there's a massive knowledge inequality. Whenever an entrepreneur approaches an investor, it's generally their first time or close to their first time. The investor, that's probably the 10th pitch they've seen that day. So there's a real inequality in that exchange, and it's tough. There are good resources, good books, and calling on favours, but there's no doubt about it. That's a really tough thing to have to do as an entrepreneur. You're sort of in the dark.
There's a book called The Mum Test, and I think anyone who starts any business, it's a book just to show around sort of product market fit and key metrics that investors want to look at. So, your cost of acquisition, your return on investment, all of the basic metrics, which to an investor is just simple. As someone starting a startup in their basement, you're not going to be thinking of that. You're thinking, this is useful for this one person. So I do recommend that as like a read beforehand, so you can get in the mindset of what an investor's looking at. Because, I don't think it's ever too early to be thinking about that next stage.
I'm just very aware that we're very pro-investment here, because 2 angel funds and ROLI's taken a lot. Is there a case where, there's something I've considered a lot. And I think there's only one real case where I would take investment is to tackle the software side of my company. I want to do software emulations of my plugins, and I want to own those rights. I don't want them to be licensed. But so far, I haven't heard a good argument to take investment. I'm just curious if you have any advice for companies. I mean, is it always just, if you see a good brand, like, oh yeah, come aboard, we'll take you? Or is it, is there some advice you can give?
It's generally just harder because, Yoti is an example of a tech company that's fully privately owned, but they were serial entrepreneurs previously, so they could invest that money into it. At some point you're going to run out of money. So if you can do a good go-to-market and you can get buy-in earlier, then definitely do that, because you're giving up equity essentially anyway. So if you want to hold those rights, but it's, I don't.
The other thing I was wanting to bring up is that, sorry, I'm actually here, I'm not on the panel, I'm actually just trying to get advice as well.
Just making notes.
There's a lot of people.
Well, what was I going to say? So, if you're talking about, so ROLI has some really innovative products, and you had this route to market which was kind of secure, and I'm sure there's people that are out there that like myself, I guess the value of my company is basically in my head, really, for the time being. So, surely the time for investment isn't now. So I'm just trying to, make sure it's not just an investment fest going on over here. And
I'm certainly not. I think there are a huge number of downsides to taking other people's money. But the reality is, and most audio businesses, there's normally a heavy technology component to the businesses that I see, and developing technology is quite capital intensive, and so you're gonna need some cash to get going, and so that has to come from either, public funding, so grants, or it comes from private funding, from investment, or it comes from corporate profits, if you're in that, or it comes from your own salary and your sort of passion money. But the money needs to come from somewhere, because humans need to eat and sleep and all those things. And so ideally, if you could get to the point, it seems you have, Charlie, of selling products before having to sell any equity, then absolutely amazing.
I have sold some equity to someone very close and to a family member. But, you know, still got to pay my bills.
Yeah.
So,
And then the reason why investment is quite useful sometimes is because of competition again. I mean, if another squidgy keyboard, no offence, comes along and is much more heavily funded than ROLI, then that gives them a competitive advantage. So have to be aware of other people's trains having more coal and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think it comes back to understanding what your aspirations are with your brand or your product. You know, do you want to do something that is a passion project just to, you know, earn enough to get by, or do you want to be the next Google or whatever? You know, how lofty are your aims? Because that will be a huge basis for how you want to be able to fund the business. And I think in terms of investing capital and when and who to get that from, again, it's what do you need it for? So, you know, it might be related to a particular project where getting the backing or the investment of a particular company would actually be really amazing for you in terms of building out your network or introducing you to the right people. Like maybe you get investment from a manufacturing partner that's going to help manufacture your products at a more effective price so you can reach your go-to-market price point without sacrificing anything. Maybe it's, you know, it's a recording label, or maybe it's, you know, whoever it is, if there's something that they can add
is that how
value
you saw
to.
your deal with Spitfire? Is it Spitfire Audio that ROLI took on?
No, Spitfire wasn't that bought by Apple?
Who's the brand at Tile Yards that you bought recently, the software brand?
Oh, we bought FXpansion.
That's it, sorry, yeah. So is that how you saw that? Is it's gonna benefit ROLI by bringing them
Yeah,
on?
I mean, so sort of to take sort of a slight step back and sort of answer one of your points as well about using money and using investment. It's building out the sustainability of the brand. So, I mean, one of the most important things for ROLI to do early on was to open patents and to have patents against what we do. I know some of you might know Ben Supper, who works at ROLI. He works in our R&D team, and he also works in the licensing and patenting and that sort of team. And it's incredibly important for us to protect the IP around what we're doing so that there isn't someone else that can come along and do exactly what we're doing or use our technology, and that we have a process and a backing behind it where that's protected. I think then in terms of looking at how now we invest or who we choose to work with, at ROLI, you know, we made a product that was a little bit ahead of its time. And when it was first launched, you had to kind of hack it to make it work with stuff because it uses multi-channel MIDI, basically, to communicate with. And at the time, everything was in mono. So that's like us trying to go to the market with this, you know, surround sound system, and everyone's working in mono. And it's like, oh, we're going to have to hack the hell out of this, guys. You know, we've got to a point now where the MIDI Association, I can't remember, MIDI Manufacturers Association, really interesting job, sorry if anyone was there. They've now made it a standard for MPE, which is our multi-dimensional polyphonic expression. But for an acquisition like FXpansion, for instance, that was really around us building out our own offering to customers, because when someone buys a keyboard, they want it to have some sounds that they can make and they can use in their workflow. So, you know, FXpansion have got one of the best sound libraries in the business. You know, from their drums through to their synths, they've got some amazing software engineers, and you know, having the value of those engineers in the company developing for us and with us, as well as this huge sound library, was the real value in that. So I think coming back to even getting investment or using investment, like, what is the biggest value in your business? Like, what is your unique thing that you have that you can either patent, or that is your value outside of your inventory or outside of your particular business? You know, what is the value in there? Is it your expertise around doing something? Is it your particular feature that you've patented? But based on what that is and what you want to do next, I would say is a good way of looking at it. But I wouldn't say the investment route is for everyone. I think it tends to, I mean, ROLI is a little bit of an anomaly because it tends to suit software companies a lot more. There's a lot more software companies. Doing a hardware startup is really hard. But it's not going to be the right solution for everyone. But I think, and I think you made a really good point when you said you're spending someone else's money. And I think this is something that's so important to remember, is that you are spending someone else's money. So how are you going to spend it? Why are you going to spend it? And what are you trying to do? But there are other options out there. And I think, especially for audio startups, maybe where there is a lot of technology and a lot of R&D, there's some amazing funds out there to help you with R&D. You can claim all your tax back on R&D. You can claim back a load of expenses around R&D. There's different funds and stuff, especially around British companies that are doing R&D. There's actually quite a lot of help out there to give you a bit of a ground start. So if you only need a little bit, make sure you research that, do some networking and see what helps out there, because there's actually quite a lot of stuff that you can get for free, depending on what you're doing. So definitely look down all of those channels as well. And don't forget about students as well, people that want PhD placements or working on projects that you can get time from them. If you just need investment money to get people, then definitely look at whether there's people that want to do this stuff as part of their learning and education and their passion projects, and put that together.
There's actually a few universities that offer similar things where you, Queen Mary University for one, they release some of their PhD students to come and work for you on a project. And
Release.
Yes.
Let them out.
They set them free. They set them free for a summer. But they give you give them a project to work on, and they're getting paid from their program, and you get someone called to come and do all the dirty jobs for you.
It leads
I'm
on
really
to,
excited and tagged.
Yeah, absolutely.
it sort of leads on to another one of the questions we had. I mean, we spoke a lot about teams, and we're diving into sort of personnel now. So I guess, can we maybe sort of highlight a few more aspects about what sort of members of your team you would need? So there's obviously some maybe business support, maybe some design R&D support, etc. Who else do you think would be an important team member?
Well, as a startup, you're doing everything. That's like all of those things is your job.
There's got to be a
right?
point when you're going to move out and not be maybe so siloed.
Yeah.
So
And something that people again don't pay enough attention to on occasion is the importance of especially the founder relationships, because I joke, but it's sadly true that I see Chris and Bobby, my co-founders, more than I see my wife, like probably 10 times as much. I've seen that like 30 minutes a day sort of thing, and I bought a house and I'm married to her. Like the co-founder thing needs to be even stronger, because you're sort of progressing to a position where it becomes increasingly difficult to separate that. There's no right way to approach it, but it needs to be given enough significance and enough weight, because it's very difficult. And this is why when people talk about the important things that investors look for, they always talk about team. It's because it's so difficult to remove someone. If someone's a significant owner of a proportion of the business, say in a CEO position, it is very, very hard to dislodge them to the benefit of the business. And same with the co-founder, it's very difficult to get rid of them if that's the necessary thing. So that has to be paid attention to, it really does.
At Founders Factory, talent is first and tantamount, and I think about more than 70% of my role is finding co-founding relationships and how they work, and experimenting on how these relationships are set up and the different types of archetypes, like commercial, technical, however. I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's just about teams that gel well, and they're the ones that get invested in, because you're invested in the people in the team, not necessarily the idea. I mean, a lot of, Facebook's not a new idea. It's just a team that ran it well.
Yeah, in fact, different people have a different approach to this, but I've heard it expressed that the most important thing is the team, the second most important thing is the market, and the third is the product. Because kind of in that hierarchy, those things are progressively more or less difficult to change. You can switch your product quite easily. Shifting market is more difficult, especially if you've got domain expertise. Changing a team at founder level is not impossible, but pretty hard.
have you seen a book called The Founder's Dilemma, which is, the guy's talking about leaving your baby, getting to a point of success, and at what point do you let go? So I guess it's even as an exit strategy, if you've got a decent amount of success, that's also an interesting dynamic, isn't it?
Was that specifically your question, or more about staff as well? Or?
Well, yeah, just generally. So, I know it's like, obviously, I'm looking at making software, so for me, it's like, what else do I need in terms of support for me to maybe sort of pursue other ideas with it? So, I know there's obviously sort of like financial advice and maybe sort of marketing strategy and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's that whole point of the team and the dynamics behind the team is obviously key.
Yeah.
But I know from your experiences, because ROLI's got some really fantastic people down there. The portfolio and Ben Supper and guys like that. So there's a really dynamic bunch of minds in there, isn't there?
It's a cool bunch of people. ROLI's culture and team are sort of really central to what they do. So they say that we're not a team of people, we're a team of polymaths, and they really want you to bring your whole self to work. So, we have quite a laid-back office environment. It's very much like a tech startup, so there's lots of futons and cushions and books and random instruments and people working wherever. We have hack cafes and we have hack projects and team times and fitness time and yoga and massage and all of this stuff. We do a lot of work as well, but for the team strategy, basically when you hire someone, you look at their application, experience and qualifications and stuff, but you also do a polymath questionnaire. And I would say the polymath questionnaire can sometimes be just as important, if not more important, than the actual CV, because it's not a test, but it's understanding, are you a profile of someone that is going to fit with the team, that's going to bond with the team, what can you add? And we don't just look for someone who's like, I'm amazing at marketing bottles of water. That's all I do, that's what I live for, that's what I love, that's everything about me. We want to know what people do at the weekend, what was their favourite book, favourite film, and it's trying to get to know people a little bit, because as Jon was saying, you spend so much time with these people and you're doing things which are really, really hard, that if you don't have some mutual respect and understanding with each other and can leave your ego at the door and just come in and get on with what you need to do, then you're going to have problems. So it's been really important at ROLI, and I think it's the first place I've worked that's really sort of valued trying to build a team and a culture. And I think we've gone through a really difficult period of late, because we've got to that point where you're not a little company anymore. You're starting to be quite a big company, but you're not yet a big company. So I guess a bit like teenage years, you go through some growing pains of trying to get that right and understand, what things can you let go of now that it's a big team and we're not sitting around ideating, we're actually trying to sell some stuff, So it's a fine balance. But I mean, going back to your initial point about, the team and who to add and when, as Charlie said, I think starting something is pretty much just you doing everything and being prepared to do everything, but you don't know what you don't know. Some people don't like to admit that.
I don't want to add to use the term privilege, because you've worked very hard to be there, but you are all talking from this point of you're able to hire who you want, really. I think so. From my point of view, I've actually found it incredibly hard to hire people, and it's made me change my business model considerably over the last year. So I hired doing hardware. I had this goal of this idea that I'm going to create this design consultancy business, and that's going to fund the early stages of developing Big Bear Audio, because I could bring the money in doing that way. And with that, I'd need a workshop, and with that, I'd need a team. And part of what I was saying earlier about learning how to deal with disappointment of that, you can hire people and they can say that, this is actually going to work out really well, and you get on really well, and then they let you down or something goes wrong. And that's actually led me to now change my model completely. So now I still have this dream of owning a manufacturing suite, definitely not in London anymore, but somewhere. But now I basically outsource all my construction. It's still within the M25, which is part of my ethos, but instead of hiring people, I basically have 4 members of staff, but they do 1 day a week each. So I've got my queen of content, Anna, and I've got the guy that does my mechanical engineering, and someone that does some PCB design, and then someone that comes in and does some soldering. But I've just created this salary from these that 4 people's jobs can do. But honestly, I've been trying to hire people for the last 6 months, and it's not as if people don't. I think if they knew about the job, or if I advertised better, they'd possibly want it. But we're talking on very vast different scales here. Now, I'd love to be in a position to do that, but I think very early on, you need to sort of say, well, I don't. From my point of view, I don't think hiring people is I'm not anywhere near ready to do that, because if there's jobs I can do, then I'm just going to have to do it anyway.
I guess you've got to find someone who's just bonkersly passionate
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, which is just stupid. Yeah,
You should clone yourself, Charlie.
yeah, I've considered it. Yeah.
I think
I think it is, if your business has reached a point where even if you're not sleeping, eating or going to the bathroom during daylight hours and you can't get everything done and there's an opportunity there, then you probably need to hire someone, right? But,
Yes.
what I was going to say with, you don't know what you don't know until you sit down and think about it is, if you know nothing about a particular area or very limited and you realise in order to get to the next stage you could do with some advice around that, then I would say that is a good area to target. And it doesn't mean it's a full-time employee. As you were saying, you use freelancers.
Yeah.
There's so many amazing freelancers out there. There's so many people that do a little bit of this in their spare time that are interested in doing these projects. So, is this something that you're going to need continuously, or do you just need a little bit of advice? Is it a short-term project over a few weeks? But understand what you need and how, and then I would say start there in the approach.
I think, so when I was at Dojo, no one knew who we were, and we were a tech startup, and we had trouble hiring, but what we focused on and doubled down on was not like domain expertise in certain areas. It was growth mindset, and I think that's the thing, like someone who's bonkers as you, or someone who's willing to learn, because you're doing a bit of everything and anything in a startup. If people are invested in the idea, then that's, I think, probably more important than having that expertise. And then after that, you can start thinking about actually separating out functions and having experts in and so on.
Yeah, they've got to believe in what you're doing.
I guess if you've got the good business plan and you've got your sort of, market route and your sort of model built, and you've got a couple of years of running that and it's stable, then maybe it's the point to consider reflecting on how you might bring other people in. I mean, do you get times maybe you've got people pitching to you and you're just like, your team's totally wrong, get this person in, or... Is that
It's
sort of
hard to say that to people's
Yeah,
faces.
well, yeah, I know, it's probably,
Yeah, I mean, most of the time they just won't get invested in. You can't really normally say it's because your CEO is a nut job, but
Okay.
yeah, it happens.
But it's I think it gets I don't know what the law is, but it gets increasingly more easy to hire. It never gets easy as a company grows, but it gets easier. Like the first couple of hires, I sort of learned from my brother through this. Like he now runs a company of about 100 people or so. But he does AV installations for super rich people and whatnot. And he was 2 people for 5 years, and then scaled from 2 people to about 50 across a year, I think, a couple of years. Wow. But it wasn't really those additional hires through that time. It was kind of the first couple that flicked the switch, and they were the hardest people. And I think a lot of people feel it's a kind of a possession thing. Like to give up control of this thing that you're intimately obsessed with is quite a personal battle, quite a personal challenge, and then give someone else ownership and trust them to not let you down and whatnot. That on an individual, personal level, that's quite a challenge. I feel like I'm saying everything's a challenge here. God, everything's a challenge.
The challenge is an opportunity, right?
I think to add to that, the way I see it, you need to be a creator. I always thought that I was just like the product designer, and now I just feel like I'm just the curator of the products that I want to make. And if there's jobs that people can do that maybe they can do a bit better than me, or at least they can just do it and I don't have to, it's really important. But yeah, giving tasks away is hard, especially when you don't trust people. Yeah.
So maybe the last little point before we open it to the floor, guys. I mean, let's think about maybe managing success, because we know about companies that might have a run and build, etc., and bubble, etc. There's famous record shops that have done that in the UK for ages, isn't there? So maybe, I mean, how do you guys feel about managing growth?
Do you mean just paying the rent, or like?
Well, yeah, I mean...
I think I would say managing growth is sustaining growth, and I guess, we're an audio engineering society, so I imagine some of your audio engineers are working in the field. So I guess it's a little bit like working with an artist in an artist development program. You know, this is great for the first material. Do you think they're going to make it to a second album or even a second EP? You know, is it a one-hit wonder? Is it a one-off project? And I think sometimes in building a startup and building a product, you know, what's the long-term vision? And, you know, I'm sure you've seen so many lovely vision decks over your times of speaking to people, but, you know, what is your vision beyond that initial product? Where is that leading to? Because, you know, you might be super successful or have a load of interest or get a load of buzz, your video might go viral, but what's next after that?
Yeah, it's like you need to sustain momentum as well.
Exactly, yeah. Finding a way to keep sustainable growth of kind of what's your long-term development strategy around the brand, and how do you think you're going to fulfill that? Now, that might change. It's highly unlikely that you're going to make a plan before you start and exactly follow that vision through, but at least have an idea of what can be beyond it so that you're doing that in mind. And I guess it's a bit like, you know, if you're mixing a record, is it a single or are you mixing an album? And your strategy around that will be different based on whether you're doing a single or making an album. And it's the same thing with a product or a brand, is that you've got to think a little bit more about how does this all fit together and where we're trying to get to.
Have a good product manager.
Another thing I find myself saying a lot is that when you're building a business and growing a business, one of the key factors you have to pay attention to is people's confidence. Like you need to continuously ensure you have the confidence, especially of your investors, but of your team and of the market and the press and everything else, because as soon as that starts to drop, we're all susceptible to that sort of panic and fear of, okay, why aren't things going as well as they should be? And so growth is necessary in a number of ways, but I think it's a trap to overpromise, because that under-delivery causes a knock-on effect on confidence, which can have quite an erosive effect.
So it's managing expectations.
Yeah, I think so. Because, and no one likes to see a sort of a downturn in the graph, because then you start to get scared, even if there's good reason. So, maintaining confidence through growth is a super important thing.
So anyone got any questions, guys? We're about 8:45, so we've got a mic. Rob's going to pop over with the microphone for you. So.
Okay, when to or not to own, or maybe how to realize when to give up.
Sorry, can you repeat it?
When to give up.
When to give up?
Never.
It's quite common to hear about overinvested ideas and stories about, carry on with the stuff that isn't worth it. So how to realize it's time to maybe
Don't give up, just pivot.
I can only talk from personal experience there, but like I'm already way in too deep with big and there's just no situation where this doesn't work out now. And I'm excited about the future products and the direction we're going in. And I've been kind of anti-investment all evening, but if it comes 6 months' time and if I approach someone and say, look, I think this is going to work out, but going to need some money and going to sell a load of equity, that's what I'll do. If I give up, then I don't know, it's just not an option really. It's just going to be a quick run to the grave otherwise.
I think if I was going to say when's the right time to give up is before you start, maybe. If you've gone that process of is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? Is it worth my time and investment? Am I get to get anywhere in the end? I'll use another term that I learned in audio engineering from Mr. Tony Platt many years ago now, where he said in the talk the famous saying that you can't polish a turd, and if your idea is a turd, it doesn't matter what you do with it or how much investment you give it, it's not going to get anywhere. So I would say the best time to stop an idea and give up is before you've even started it. I think once you've started it, as Charlie said, you've jumped straight in at the deep end and you're in there. And sometimes it's harder to get out than it was to get in. So I would say that period before you even start is so, so important to make sure that it's doing it. And then if you're really passionate and you've gone through that process and you've thought, no, this is a good idea, there is a market for this, I believe in what I'm doing, it's going to be hard, but you should get there. If you really believe in it and you're really passionate, there should be an opportunity for success. It's just where that is. And I think talking about the running out of money thing, it's how long can you go before you start making some money, and what can you do in the interim if it's a really great idea? What are you willing to sacrifice in order to get to that point, and setting yourself limits. I wouldn't advise anyone, remortgages their house or, sells all their worldly possessions to do it. Don't put yourself at risk. Make sure that you can.
Don't start a hardware brand.
But yeah, no, I think it's difficult. I mean, I would agree a little bit with that never give up.
So maybe it's more about recognising failures and thinking about when to be dynamic, to move on, to address a new idea or to pivot a bit, rather than giving up. If something's not working, you can adapt to what you're doing.
It's that whole kind of fail fast mentality, isn't it?
The problem is that the narrative around this is always the commentator is always people that have succeeded. And they're like, yeah, just keep going, man, you get there in the end. It's like come on, that's not the case. And I really like that there are a series of events around the place where people telling stories of how they failed, because that is en masse the sort of more likely outcome. And yeah, it is inevitable that things will go wrong, and you will have to stop. But you do just have to embrace that as part of the risk profile of starting a business. And everyone involved in this ecosystem has a collective understanding of that sort of risk ratio.
Yeah, and it's whether it is a failure or if you've just pivoted on what you've decided to do, or you've managed to have your own exit strategy. But I think everyone I know that runs a business or has started a business has failed in many other things. A lot of the time, that you meet these few people that it's their first ever business and first company, and they've had this amazing idea and it's been really successful, but they're really, really rare. A lot of us have made many stupid mistakes, and I think if it feels like there's nothing viable there anymore and you're putting your own livelihood at risk, then pivot, find your own exit strategy and do something else maybe.
I don't think any of us answered your question there. So.
Don't give up.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion. A theme that's come up quite often is the business of market research to ascertain, who you're going to shift units to. But market research is big business, and big companies spend a lot of money outsourcing that, or maybe have internal departments to do a very robust job to minimize risk. But if you're a startup with a very limited budget, can you recommend any strategies for how to approach that pragmatically and thoroughly to minimize your risks?
Make friends with business analysts who can do it for you as a favour.
And I think there's kind of two bits in there. I'm not sure whether you're referring to market research in the sense of understanding the market, so in terms of competition, or if you're talking about market research in terms of the market's response to your product, because they're two different things.
I guess they are two different things, but the same applies to both of them, really. It's about how to get an accurate picture of the market that you're going to exist within.
Because the prevailing sort of strategy for testing whether there's market appetite is this lean approach that people talk about, which is the fail fast mentality, where you deploy a product and you get feedback as quickly as you can, and then you iterate, test and learn, which has taken some flack as an approach because it's not right for everything, for every type of business. It's probably
doesn't work in the aeroplane industry.
Yeah. I mean, it works really well for SaaS businesses, like online service businesses, websites and whatnot, where you can deploy changes very easily. But that is quite an attractive way to test the market appetite. Rather than doing focus groups and things, that's just like, nah, it's way out of the question for early stage businesses. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, I would echo that and say I think it, again, depends on what the product is. If it is a software product, it's great to get some beta out there as quickly as possible and get some feedback, because there's probably a use case that you didn't think of, or someone finds a bug that you didn't notice, and then you can iterate on that rather than trying to have the most perfect over-engineered thing and actually you've spent loads of dev time making something that no one actually needs or uses. So I would say if it's something that you can activate quite quickly, to do that. In terms of going back to your question a little bit on market research, I'd again agree with that point. If you've got any friends or people that have access to this data or do business analytics, it's great to call on them. But, you know, back to your plan again, you know, who is this for? You know, who's going to buy this product or this service? Understand what industry or what sector or segment you're going after. Like, is there a demographic of person that you're trying to attract? And there's actually quite a lot of data on the internet that's for free. There's quite a lot of reports which people publish, which you can read for free. If you've got anyone...
report's really comprehensive, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's a huge... So yeah, I mean, in our industry, like if we're looking at audio and music, there is limited data because there's a lot of small companies that don't publish their data, and if they do, it's not necessarily accurate. But, you know, there's companies like MI Sales Track for hardware, but that's a really limited amount of data and it's really expensive. But yeah, the NAM Global Report is really useful. You know, there's, if you know anyone that has access to business databases and you can do some lookups, you know, it's worthwhile researching some competitors if there are any, like what's their turnover, what's their profit margin, like what's some of their key financial metrics to understand what's their performance. Is their business in growth? If they're a competitor and their business is declining, you know, I'd go and check some other people. Is their business declining as well? Because maybe you're trying to go into a sector that's declining. And that's going to be against you before you've even started. Likewise, if you go in and you see that their growth is like this, then you can see that the demand is growing in the market. And actually, this is the perfect time to position yourself to people because the opportunity is there. You can go in and say, this market is growing by this much, and I'm entering it, and I have this amazing idea, and it's going to be fabulous, and we're going to be really successful. So I'd do that. And then for the market research in terms of, is the product viable? If it is a hardware thing, I know you said focus groups are rubbish, but if you can have a group of peers that maybe aren't really your best mates that you go to the pub with, or are afraid to give you some constructive criticism, but just get some feedback on how people use it and watch it, record it even, like how are people using it, what do they touch, what do they look at, what do people ask about, because some of those first questions are going to be your FAQs or things that you need to address in your sales pitch or your marketing. So I'd try those angles before you spend any money on any companies.
I think particularly in the audio industry, it's actually very small, and I might advise anyone that was going to start a company, if they were straight out of uni, just to go and work for a company first and to see how all the mistakes they make. But by doing that, especially because our industry is so small, you get to go to trade shows and you get introduced to people and you get to look at the products firsthand. And you can compare that with the forums, Gearslutz and places like this, and by doing that, it's given me a real knowledge of what I think the industry is missing, that times by just pure arrogance that I think my designs are going to be better. And that's kind of it. You know, I don't think that there is a way of doing it cheaply. I think you just need to turn up at Music Messe, get a return ticket and go there for the day and talk to people. That's about it.
Any more questions? Hello.
Hi, can you speak to the money issue when it comes to IP and marketing? You've got a great idea, you've only got this much money. You don't know if it's a great idea unless you can start to market research, put the idea out there, but you don't want to send it too far out because you haven't paid to get copyright or IP registered. What do you spend your money on? How do you deal with that?
I don't think you need to worry about IP too much until you know that there's something that's a fit. Because, things take a lot of time anyway, even to get to that stage. I think we're an early stage investor, and we'd only worry about IP post sort of like seed. Because, you know, by that point, then suddenly there's going to be an interest. But to even get to that stage, that's at least a year's worth of work. So there's a big lag time generally.
I can't remember the name of the body, but there is an organisation that does They're like patent lawyers that do advice. I'll try and see
Maybe
if
Rob
the
can
brain works. But,
advise on that.
I mean,
Getting copyright is going to be incredibly hard.
patent law is a horrible minefield
Yeah.
and really challenging to actually get good patents in place. And some companies, just their strategy is getting patents, and that's their value and their purpose. But I would say in terms of an idea, I mean, I don't know how many of you have done this, but I remember if I had an idea, I would write it down and then I'd post it back to myself and then promise never to open it. So one day, if my idea had become famous, I can be like, aha. I don't know where the hell all of those envelopes are, and I'm still not in my pants, not with a day job, so it obviously didn't work. But, you know, I would say if you're at a stage where you've got an idea and you're a little bit worried about spreading it out there to test it because you think, I'm not financially in a position to go straight away, and if someone else hears about it that is, maybe they'll take my idea. I think starting off with doing, again, as much as you can, that planning, like have a business plan, make it look and seem like you really know what you want to do well. You've thought about this, you've done as much research as you can within your means, so that it doesn't feel like it's just a concept you've come up with last night and want someone else to do the hard work on. Because then it feels much harder to copy. It's like, oh, this guy's already done all of this research, he's already thought about this, you know, it'd be really difficult for me to catch up. And then start small. Maybe start with friends of friends, or, you know,
I would add that you should join the Audio Engineering Society and come to the events. You know, we're all kind of trusting people, quite intelligent, and go to the socials, start putting your ideas out, and see if it's worth doing or not.
Yeah,
You mean tell your idea to loads of other people who are very qualified to come?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but you know, I think but
We're all nice. Yeah.
if you do it at the pub, they generally forget afterwards. So.
It is a trap to fall into, like, to be over paranoid by IP protection in the early days. The conditions that dictate success, or the factors that dictate whether you kind of make it through or not, are sort of numerous, and over obsession with that one variable, it can be quite paralysing. So it's a difficult balance. It is, but I think I would urge people to tend on the side of trusting people, and I guess putting more emphasis on some of the other things which are going to dictate success, and not just worry about that bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can register a commercial patent in the US for like $100. Oh, really? And like do it yourself.
So you can register patents in America. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions, guys? Okay, well, I'd like to thank our panel for joining us. It's been really interesting, so thanks very much.